Full movie link in the description box. The Devil All the Time is set in Akemstuff, Ohio, which is not fictional, although we understandably might assume otherwise. Based on the acclaimed 2011 novel by Daniel Ray Pollock, the film lines up an impressive cast beneath filmmaker Antonio Campos, whose Christine Chubbuck biopic Christine was a hell of a character drama that almost nobody saw. So will this sprawling Southern Gothic saga knock us stiff or leave us hanging or what? The Devil All the Time. Stream it or skip it. The misery begins in Akemstuff, 1957. Willard Russell, Bill Skarsgård, lives there with his wife Charlotte, Haley Bennett, and boy Arvin, Michael Banks Repata. In the woods near their humble rented home, Willard put up a weathered cross where he and Arvin can kneel and pray, and where Willard plots to retaliate against the three men who make disparaging comments about their family, which might mean Akemstuff should be rebranded Clobberthashatatum. This is a lesson for the kid, frequently bullied, to pick your time for retaliation. The cross is possibly an homage to the one Willard saw in the war, although it was decorated with a crucified American soldier, dripping blood, covered in flies and not dead yet. Willard finished the man off and came home with a haunted look, so maybe the misery began a decade and some earlier, in the South Pacific. Things in Cold Creek, West Virginia, where Willard grew up, sometimes don't seem much better. The local preacher, Roy Lafferty, Harry Milling, is a pin-headed maniac who dumps live spiders on his face mid-sermon, to show how he conquered his fear, and the flock is sure impressed, and if not, there's sure something. Roy marries Helen, Mia Wasikowska, who Willard's mother wanted to pair him with. Roy and Helen have a baby girl who will grow up to be Lenora, Eliza Scanlon, raised by Willard's mom after the parents die horribly. She'll also raise Arvin from age 9 into his teens, Tom Holland, when his parents meet the Reaper, but not until after Willard, in a fit of grief and desperation, sacrifices his son's beloved dog to God. Rough. Maybe some of this has to do with cancer or God's perceived will, or the pair of serial killers/sex weirdos, Riley Keough and Jason Clarke, who call themselves the bait and the shooter, and not just because he has a camera. So it's the 60s now, and Arvin and Lenore are tied like bloodkin. She visits her mother's grave and prays, even though she has no memory of the woman, while a brooding Arvin stands nearby, shifting his way from foot to foot, quietly scoffing at the thought of God ever being kind. The brother of the female killer/sex weirdo is also a sheriff, Sebastian Stan, investigating the Reaper's work in the area, when he isn't entangled in the doings of organized crooks. The successor to the Spider Preacher dies. I think memory fails, but it's safe to assume if a character leaves the narrative, it's due to grim cessation, and the new one arrives in ruffled shirts and Cadillac, and he's Preston Garden, Robert Pattinson, and you can just smell the oil on this effer. In this world, people are all too familiar with sin and violence and sin and death and sin and sin and God and sin, and in Akemstuff and Cold Creek, all this stuff coagulates into one steamy swampy pool of abominant iniquity. Someone let me write this region's tourism. The Devil All the Time consists of some backwoods deliverance scenery, the airlessness of the place beyond the pines, some shots swiped from Miller's Crossing, and a general sense of wanting to be a tangled Paul Thomas Anderson-esque rumination on brutality. Performance worth watching. Pattinson really uses off with this movie, all sleaze as he chews succulently on the part of the corrupted holy man, who should be cage-matched with Eli the Boy Sunday in a slippery death fight of false godliness. Memorable dialogue. He'd never win a fist fight, but he could recite the book of Revelation in his sleep. The narrator nutshells Preston Garden sex and skin. Fair amounts of both, although none of it is at all pleasurable, and it's pretty much exclusively violent. Our take. Well, this movie sure lives up to its goddamn name. Murder, beatings, suicide, torture, war crimes. The Devil All the Time has it all. And that's just the death stuff. We might suffocate on its air of psychotraumatic horror if it took itself seriously, as more than a thin and joyless horror parade of plausibility, because it reminds us that yes, the human creature is capable of plumbing the hoary deeps of perversion and lust and bloodthirst, often for their own ghoulish sakes. The film is almost engrossing in its depiction of crestfallen humanity. Strange then, how the film nurtures such an odd, almost sneeringly humorous black comic tone, primarily via Pollock himself. In an ill-advised role as narrator, you can almost hear a matter-of-fact smirk in his voice. Yet the cynical comedy is half cultivated by Campos, as if he wants to both acknowledge tragedy and laugh at life in all its absurd pointlessness. His ramshackle approach renders the film a willow-legged facsimile of the Coen brothers' production. The bullseye's religion is not only a corrupting force, but one that enables the gullible to be devoured by predators, as subtle as an elephant in the cheesecake. So the overall vibe of this thing is off-key and disquieting, a sprawling epic of brutality, populated with an ensemble of talented players, handcuffed to gossamer characters with a shade and a half of complexity, tops. The top-billed Holland, known for playing a squeaky-voiced teen Spider-Man, is miscast as a sulky kid carrying a chunk of angry coal in his heart. The film lays out his bloody escape path, but we're barely convinced, or even cognizant, of his needs, wants, or inner life. Stan, Bennett and Wasikowska are afterthoughts, Clarke and Keough are boilerplate godless chaos agents, Skarsgård is angry and angrier, Pattinson and Melling are window dressing. The narrative exists in the contextual gloom of international conflict, World War II's shadow overlapping with the impending doom of Vietnam for the people of Nekemstif and Cold Creek. There's death here or death overseas, and any other option is lost in a cloud of hardship and despair. Pray to Jesus all you want, cause you got it coming either way.